Hello, everyone. My name is, good afternoon, I should say. Okay, sorry, my picture moved a bit. My name is Angela Cannella. I work in the Office of Civil Rights, which is OCR at the Department of State. I work as a special emphasis program manager, and disability is one of my portfolios. Secretary Blinken, we support his vision in terms of recruiting talent from a diversified group for the Department of State. You may or may not know that when there's a non-competitive hiring authority called Schedule A, this is a certification, a Schedule A letter that certifies a disability as either physical, mental, or psychological. And allows you to go into a non-competitive state with the Department of State. We also have a foreign service opportunities as well, which is not eligible for Schedule A. Now, within the 169 embassies and consulates, which we call posts, these are international assignments. And within my role, in my department, we've realized that there is no deaf representation within foreign service officers, which are called generalists. So there are no deaf signers in any of those posts. We do have a deaf specialist, Doug Surette, who's one of our panelists today. He's a deaf foreign service specialist. But we do want representation to be open and accessible for all, for people to go into those posts and serve overseas. So we want to expand our representation and see deaf people and signers serving in those positions internationally. So today, in that vein, we are hosting this panel so that you can learn more about the recruitment process, what's involved, and how you can get involved in foreign service. If you're thinking about foreign service, it's required that you take a foreign service officer test, which is administered by Pearson, which is a company that Tanya represents, and she'll explain more about that today. During this event, it'll be recorded and shared when it's ready. You can feel free to ask questions or to clarify anything that you might be curious about. Do so in the chat, and if you prefer to sign your question, you can you can raise your hand and we can turn on your video. All questions will be answered during the Q&A portion of the discussion, which is the last 15 minutes, but you can also post questions in the chat at any time, and we do have people monitoring that. This is a safe place for you to be open and ask questions about the recruitment process. Just be respectful of each other, agree to disagree, and just view this as an opportunity to learn about foreign service. Now I will turn it over to Tanya Rogers, and she'll take it from there.
Let me know when you're ready, Angela. Okay. Great. Well, everyone, good afternoon, and thank you so much for your time this afternoon to come and get this information. We really appreciate it. We welcome everyone, and we want to thank our partners at Gallaudet for providing this platform for us. So thank you very much, Gallaudet. I want to introduce myself very briefly, and then I'll talk more about sort of the Foreign Service, our hiring process, and life in the Foreign Service. First of all, a little bit of housekeeping. I posted a tinyurl.com link in the chat. That's our virtual sign-in sheet and also sign-up sheet. Please click on it maybe after the presentation and fill out the form, and that will keep you in touch with the State Department and keep us in touch with you, so you'll know when we have other events that you can participate in. Also, I wanted to mention that I have prepared a PowerPoint, which I'm not going to use right now, but I am going to share it with Gallaudet's Career Services. It'll have the basic information that I talk about here, and it will also have links so you can do your own research, and it will have links and email addresses for contacts. So please bear that in mind, that you don't have to write down everything I'm saying, that you will be able to get that information afterwards. So about myself, my name's Tanya Rogers, as Angela pointed out, and I actually work with the Office of Recruitment, the Department of State. I am a Foreign Service officer though. I've been with the department coming up on 11 years now. I am a political generalist officer, and I've served here in Washington. I've served in Bolivia. I've served in Kuwait. I've served in Pakistan. And this summer, I will rotate out for a 3-year tour in Johannesburg, South Africa. So there are 2 main paths into the State Department. One is the civil service and one is the foreign service. We're here today to talk mainly about the foreign service, but I'm happy to answer questions afterwards about the civil service if you have them. So for my discussion, I'll focus just on the foreign service. Within the foreign service, there's 2 tracks. There's the foreign service generalists and the foreign service specialists. I'm a generalist. Within the generalist core, there are 5 different specializations. There's, as I mentioned, political, there's economic, there is public diplomacy, there's management, and there's consular. At the beginning of the process, when you first sign up for what we call the Foreign Service Officer Test, you must pick one of those cones at that point. So to back up just a little bit, there are 8 steps in becoming a Foreign Service Generalist. The first step is to sign up for the Foreign Service Officer Test. And as Angela mentioned, that's administered by Pearson VUE. Pearson VUE has testing sites all over the country. We give the Foreign Service Officer Test 3 times a year. We give it in February, in June, and in October. And you can sign up before that. You go to the Pearson VUE site on my PowerPoint that I will share. I have included the link to that. And you take the test. Mainly the test is general knowledge questions and English grammar and English writing. It's free to take, and it'll take about, I want to say, 3 hours of your time approximately. And that is your first step. So when you take the test, you'll also be sent a list of questions we call personal narratives. Those are questions about, essentially about yourself and about your experience, and kind of explaining why you would be a good fit for the Foreign Service. So when you you finish those and you send them back, and we call them BECs, that's our assessment office. They receive your test score. They also receive your personal narratives, and they assess those in what's called the QEP. In the government, we have lots of acronyms, so please excuse me. The QEP is the Qualifications Evaluation Panel. They look at your personal narrative and your test score, and they decide whether your candidacy moves forward. Let's assume it does. When your candidacy moves forward, you will be invited to what's called the oral assessment, or the OA. The oral assessment typically is given in person in Washington, D.C., although before the pandemic, we did go out to the West Coast and Chicago at times during the year to give the assessment there, but we haven't been able to recently. So you come to Washington, and this is kind of, I call it sort of the interview part of the process. Now, it's not exactly an interview. It's a little bit more complex than that. Within the oral assessment, there are 3 parts. There's one called a group activity. There is a written activity. And then there's kind of the more typical interview part. All in all, the oral assessment takes about 6 hours to complete. And you are given a conditional offer of employment at the end of the oral assessment. So you know that day whether your candidacy is moving forward. So after you're given, fingers crossed, your conditional offer of employment, you then have to have get a worldwide available medical clearance. And you also have to pass a security clearance. All Foreign Service officers must be able to obtain and maintain a top secret security clearance. So a lot of people have a lot of questions about the security clearance. Our office, my office, does not do that. Our diplomatic security office does, so I can't answer in detail. But what I can say is it takes time. And it doesn't mean that your candidacy or there is bad or there's a problem or anything like that. It's essentially right now kind of a first come, first served. So they may have a stack of applications on top of yours. We say to candidates to expect the process from start to finish to take about 18 months. It could take more, it could take less, but that's a good rule of thumb. So after you get your medical clearance and your security clearance, your name is added to a register. And I mentioned there were 5 cones. There are 5 registers. So your name is put on the register according to which cone you chose. Your name can stay on the register for up to a year, after which it drops off and you have to start the process over again. But if you're called off the register, you're then given an offer of employment and invited to Washington to come and start your training. I mean, I can sort of speak personally. I took the test in the October and I was invited to come to Washington in the September. That was very, very fast. I don't think it had anything to do with me in particular. They were just hiring a lot of people then. So they were moving people through the process quite quickly. So I also mentioned Foreign Service specialists, which is Doug. We hire Foreign Service specialists because of their particular skills, education, knowledge in career fields that we require. For example, we hire medical experts, we hire IT experts, we hire engineers, we hire security specialists, among other specialists. Now, the specialists go through a similar process, except they do not have to take the Foreign Service Officer test. Their education, their experience, their knowledge suffices for the Foreign Service Officer test. What Foreign Service specialists have to do is they have to wait for a job to post, and they have to apply for that particular job on USA Jobs. That is a very similar process to civil service. So their application comes again to BECS, they're assessed at the QEP, and then specialists move forward in the same general way that the generalists do. And as Doug is a specialist, he can certainly tell you about his personal experiences. As I said, I am a Foreign Service generalist. I've served overseas a lot. I've served in Washington a lot. I would encourage you at the end, if you have questions about Foreign Service life, anything, I'm very happy to answer that, or I'm very happy to sort of go into more detail about the hiring process. I do also want to mention that we have a lot of student programs. We have internships, both paid and unpaid. We have something called the FATE Fellowship, which is for IT professionals, either undergraduate or graduate, and that pays a stipend for your tuition. And it does require a commitment to the Foreign Service at the end of that fellowship. We have the Pickering and the Wrangell, which are our flagship fellowships, and they are designed to increase diversity in the Foreign Service. And we have many other opportunities. For example, there's Pathways, and there's a lot of study abroad opportunities through ECA, which is our Education and Cultural Affairs Bureau. So I'll go ahead and stop there, and I will let Chris talk about accessibility and accommodation. And again, thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate your attendance, and I'm happy to take any questions at the end of the panel. Thank you.
Okay, we will turn it over to Chris Brown. He'll expand more about accommodation and information for people that are in the recruitment process and what that might look like.
Okay, thank you, Angela. Like Angela had mentioned, my name is Chris Brown, and I work for the Office of Accessibility and Accommodations. So that is the center office for the department that provides all reasonable accommodations to the employees with disabilities, both in civil service and for foreign service. So we have to meet the department's goals in recruitment and hiring and retention and promoting employees with disabilities to meet our quotas of number of employees that have disabilities in the department. So how we do that is just like what Tanya had mentioned, recruiting people in the foreign service. And, you know, and my part is providing accommodations to those who are planning on joining the foreign service with accommodation needs. So basically, we try to make sure that we get as much information as we can from the employee themselves and go through the accommodation process, which I will explain just a little bit on how to get started with that. So first, the employee will submit their form, request form that says what kind of accommodation they will need to help them support their essential duties for their position, which means what exactly is required for them to perform their duties. Secondly, their medical questionnaire would be submitted, which means it's a form with all the questions related with their medical condition, and so that the office can review that, and then the Bureau of Medical Services, MED, will review your conditions and then make a determination that the employee is qualified with a disability and can receive accommodations from our office. So that's the general process for the beginning part of that process. So for those of you who identify as deaf or deafblind or hard of hearing, most of the accommodations that you request for is typically with interpreting services. So once you pass the FSOT and the FSOA, understanding we only provide accommodations for the FSOA. That's because that's here in Washington, D.C., whereas the Pearson VUE Center, they accommodate for their test takers separately. So if you do need accommodations for FSOT, then that means you would go through Pearson VUE, who will be able to, you can email them and they'll be able to accommodate for your request. So if you need an interpreter for FSOT, they can inform you whether or not they can provide that for their organization. But for FSOA, we are responsible for providing interpreters. So for any deaf candidates that are going to be taking that test, we will have interpreters ready for that test day. So remember, it is a 6-hour period. So we do have interpreters who are knowledgeable about FSOA terminology and have experience and would be prepared to provide services for that particular test for that day. So just like what Tanya had mentioned, you'll know that day whether or not you've passed the test or not, the FSOA. And then if you've passed, then we can start making arrangements. When you go through the training, you'll receive your first assignment. We'll make arrangements for interpreting services for that as well. So the interpreter would be with the deaf employee with whatever their future position would be. So our function is to make sure that deaf employees receive accommodations specifically with interpreting services. So that's the basis of what we're trying to do to make sure that our employees are receiving accommodations and continue or start their career with the Department of State. We also do make sure that we provide, for example, if you do a Foreign Service Institute, FSI, to learn a specific language, or maybe you're taking a management course, we also provide accommodations for those as well, including interpreting services. So it really just depends on what your requirements are for your assignment. But that's the bottom line of our services. And of course, we're always, able to receive and give feedback on how the quality of interpreting services that you're receiving with your post. We do take in that feedback and we do evaluate to see if we need to make any modifications to our services to make sure that we are truly fitting your specialized needs for your assignment or post. So that's a brief synopsis of our services. We are located in Washington, D.C., and we do have one staff interpreter. And this interpreter does provide interpreting services and flies out overseas to different locations to provide interpreting services in person. And now with our remote technology world, able to provide services through virtual means as well, whether it's webinars, from home, which is actually very helpful, during the pandemic. We're also hiring more staff interpreters, so that because we are predicting that there will be, we will need interpreting services needed in the future. So we are hiring for more interpreters for that as well. So I think that's all. So I'm going to turn it back over to Doug, who can explain more about his actual experience as a deaf foreign service employee. Okay, thank you.
All right, hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Chris, for the introduction and for your comments. So as everybody has said, as Tanya started with, there are two different tracks that you can take. There's the generalist or the specialist. And there is, under the PD, public diplomacy, there is another track. And there's a specialist there that I am for IT. And so as we start with that, you can apply for a job, and that's what I did, and I got my job. So as a generalist, they have different foreign service officers, different tests, and Department of State provides interpreting. So if you go to another country, understand that you would have an interpreter that would be a 3-month rotation, and you would have a different interpreter with you during that time. The Department of State does provide reasonable accommodations, and that works well. In the Foreign Service, you would need to ask yourself, would this be am I a good representative of America? Am I a good person to show deaf equivalency? Can I show that in different countries, whatever their laws are, their language requirements, just know that they're very different. In the US, it is special and it is unique here. In the US, we are treated equally, and we do have the ability to go to school, to do Gallaudet, RIT, CSUN. There's so many different opportunities for people who come to the US to try to be equal and to better themselves. The Foreign Service is a great opportunity to show other countries and to represent America in a great way. I have gone to 4 different countries. The first one was Manila in the Philippines. Then I went to Singapore. I went to Moldova, Eastern Europe, Dublin, Ireland, and my 4th post is in Washington, DC. And so I have a new opportunity here that I'm excited about. My experience here, the job that I have, is really unique. I cannot emphasize enough how unique it truly is. No other job is similar to it. And in the generalists, this experience that I have here is just incredible. It shows people really, you know, just how Americans, how they respond to you as an American, and it makes you feel really great. In Moldova, for example, there was an IT job, and I did several of them, and would help establish, you know, protections against domestic violence cases. They set up different programs that would help in the deaf school, and I established relationships with that country and got to show unique ways to improve their quality of life. So there were some incredible moments there that I got to experience, similar to that in the Philippines, trying to communicate during when they had, I think in 2013, there was a really bad hurricane, and responding to that, providing aid, food, and communication support, along with many other things. I was actually working in a boat that you had to take to the embassy. And so that seems silly, but the goal was to provide support for the people that we work with. And it's truly a touching experience and something that made my life better. And it's just great to show the diversity of America, that I am the one Foreign Service person who's deaf, but we would love to see that through recruitment, those numbers go up, to really show the diversity within America and what we have. Not only just the background diversity, but just anything related to diversity within the Foreign Service. And that's something that I'm proud of. Let's see. I guess I would just be happy to answer any questions. If there's specific questions, like what is Foreign Service life like? What are some of the benefits of either Foreign Service or a generalist? We can talk about the tests. There's a foreign language test, and any foreign country, if you have knowledge of that language, you can pass their language test. And but you don't need to. And so that one was easy because I didn't have to have the language. But so really, that's just the summary. I think Tanya really gave a great depiction of the cones, the different pathways, and Chris said good stuff about how providing interpreting services, the same thing, they'll always provide interpreting services for what we needed. So the point is, I would love to see more people who are deaf joining, and so I look forward to that. So I'd be happy to answer any questions or just turn it over.
There are some questions coming up in the chat. And I will add that Chris and Tanya, if you are able to answer these questions too. Let me pull them up. What about opportunities for deaf applicants? Is the security clearance the same process as you would go through for an agency like NASA, or is the one at NASA more in depth potentially? What's the Department of State's security clearance process? Does anyone in particular want to answer that?
I can start off, and I'm perfectly happy for Chris or Doug to chime in on anything I may miss. As I mentioned in my presentation, the security clearance process is completely under the purview of diplomatic security. But having gone through the process myself, I can sort of certainly talk about it from the applicant's perspective. So after you pass the OA, diplomatic security will contact you. The first thing you have to do for your clearance is you have to fill out a very long form, which you will be sent. And it goes back about 10 years. After you fill in the form and you submit that form, you will be interviewed by a diplomatic security contractor or agent to sort of ask specific questions about things you may have said on your form. I caution applicants that it's often not what you do, but it is definitely lying about it. So I encourage, more than encourage, everyone to be very honest on your security form. Moving forward, you have to list contacts. The diplomatic security agent will visit your neighbors. They will interview your contacts. And they will sort of check things that are in the public record. And perhaps not in the public record. Now, you sort of ask specific questions about other specific agencies. I'm not going to speak to what other agencies do, quite frankly, because I'm not an expert on the security clearance process for other agencies. I will say, though, that the State Department does not require a polygraph, and some other agencies do. So if Doug or Chris have anything to add, I will certainly let them jump in at this point.
This is Doug. No, that was a good, sorry. Yeah, this is Doug. That was a good summary.
There are 6 other questions. So one person wants to come on screen to sign their question, so I'll let them do that. Smitra, do you want to speak your question or come on screen? Smitra, will you turn on your video? Okay, I'll figure it out, but let's move on to a next question and come back to you if that's okay. Doug, do you have any plans to move to an overseas post in the near future? And what's your next step? What might be your new post?
Definitely yes. I can definitely say yes. It could be next year as a generalist or specialist. Either way, they typically do a 1 to 3 year post within a different country. That's typically the time frame. In DC, I'm at 2 years. So I'm looking at next year to be moving again. So yes, I haven't yet decided, still waiting to hear I've applied to a few places and just waiting to hear back from them. And that's how the process is.
Okay, looks like we have Smitra on the line.
Hello. Yes, thank you. Thank you for letting me pull up my video.
Okay, you can go ahead with your question.
Hello, nice to meet everyone.
Good.
So, I know there's different kinds of foreign service positions. I've been checking them out, and there's a large variety. The challenge that I've been facing with the foreign language requirement, because I know that I have two languages from where I came from, so I know other languages. So I'm not sure about the requirements for foreign language. What are the specifics for that? What specifically is required? And then my other question is for the IT specialist, and I know you've mentioned something about the education. What about other fields like finance or policy? I'm curious if there's other fields for that.
Doug, do you want to start, and then other people can respond as well?
Should I turn on my video?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So they have in the field, there's a specialist, for example, like finance, HR, GS, general services, or any type of like logistical, like moving parts. There are a lot of different, it could be in FAC facilities, building, like there's just a lot of different specialties that you can be involved in. It depends on what's available. Not always on a specific timeline, but as things are available, they come up. I think there's a finance management available now, or a few months ago, I did see one of those. I'm not sure. But the language portion for FSI, the Foreign Service Institute, that's just the academy that we work with, and they do require language there. They have the specific requirements. They have like a reading proficiency as well as a spoken proficiency of the language. They are figuring out how to modify those to adjust for people who are deaf, and they are working on that now. And so I don't know, Tanya, do you want to say more on that? The language requirements?
I'm sorry, I didn't take myself off of mute there. I can say a little bit, but I'm also going to defer to Chris if they're on what the accommodations are on language. So as I mentioned, I'm a Foreign Service Generalist. When you are hired into the Foreign Service, it is not required that you already have a foreign language. Now, it can help you. I mentioned in my presentation about the register, and with certain languages, if you pass the test initially, you can get a bump up in points on the register, which helps your candidacy. However, it's not required. I personally, I had like high school and college Spanish, which didn't get me to sort of what the State Department considered a professional level. So I didn't have a language coming in. Where the language is required is your first 2 tours as a generalist, you're considered a junior, an entry-level officer, and you're on probation. And there's several requirements, a couple of major requirements to getting off probation. You have 2 tours to do it, which can be between 4 and 6 years. And the major requirement is 1, you do a consular tour. And that's working in our consular section, which is American Citizen Services and visa applicants. And the second is you gain a foreign language at the required test score. For example, French, Spanish, the required test score is professional level, which is a 3.3. But if you're going to learn Arabic or Mandarin, Those are considered much more difficult languages, and the score level you have to pass is a little bit lower. As I said, you have about 5 years. You have 5 years to get off probation, so you have time, and it depends what it depends where you go. So for example, my first tour was in Washington. Obviously, I didn't need a language. My second tour was in Bolivia, so I took Spanish, and I got the 3-3. So I was able to get off probation, and that's the typical pathway. But I defer to Chris on sort of if there's any accommodation, what the accommodations are for deaf and disabled individuals.
Yeah, really, I'm thinking about the accommodations related with language training. So if you're going to an FSI for language training, if you're just a deaf individual, but you can read and write in another foreign language without any accommodations needed, then you don't technically need accommodations for it. I know there are some, applicants who they need some additional time, like if there's a learning disability or if there's some visual disabilities, they need time to read and write. That's the kind of accommodation that we would add to your needs. If you can read and write in another language, you might actually not need any accommodation. It just depends on the individual. And also, I know that Tanya had mentioned that the requirement for the foreign language is not immediate. So if you do have to work overseas, you will be working with a local employee staff, LES, and they know their own native language there, and they will be working side by side with you with the foreign service. So, and they do provide a lot of translation support services there as well. So there is a lot of things that are available for you already.
No.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is Doug. That's why we have our language experts here.
Thank you. I look forward to looking at your website. Thank you.
Okay, next question. Looks like it's for Chris Brown, and they're asking to clarify for the FSOA, there is accommodations available, but you don't run the ones for FSOT. Is that correct? So those are two different entities, and how do those look different?
Sure. So like Tanya had mentioned, with foreign service, before you are accepted and are able to enter the foreign service, you first have to take the FSOT first. So you can actually take the Pearson VUE test. It's provided all over the United States. So suppose you do need accommodations, you have to ask them directly with Pearson VUE. And they have an accommodations coordinator that's ready to support you and meet the needs that you need for accommodation. And they'll review your forms and requests, and they'll provide the accommodation, and they'll either provide it or deny it, and they'll give a reason why if they have to deny it. They could also give alternatives if they aren't able to meet that accommodation. So again, that's all through Pearson VUE. That's FSOT. So if you pass the FSOT, then the Department of State will invite you for the oral assessment, and we call that the FSOA. And that is in Washington, D.C., and that's the 6-hour test. So it takes the entire day. So that is going to have interpreting services provided by us, and the interpreter will be with you all day long for the FSOA. And at the end of that day, if you pass or you don't pass, you'll get to know, right after you take that test. Hopefully that clarifies everything. Let me know if that wasn't clear.
Next question. One person is asking about support services for learning the language on site, and if there are provisions for learning a foreign sign language there at post.
So this is Doug. You will always have the opportunity to learn foreign sign if you're around other people who are deaf within that community and that culture. It's definitely something that you could pick up there. Just like people who are hearing, you know, when they're in the other countries, just through assimilation, they're able to pick up some of the native language. But from my experience, the deaf people in other countries really like engaging and meeting and signing with other people who are deaf, especially Americans. It's a shared mutual benefit. You can learn from each other, the backgrounds, just even the food cultures. It's something very unique that I have seen. Within the State Department, they don't provide training for foreign sign language, but you will have, as an individual, just an opportunity to get ingrained in the community there.
Yes, this is Chris. I do know someone who used to work for the Department of State, and their post was in Germany. And she was surprised to find that there were several German sign language. So it's not just one for the country. There's actually several sign languages in German. So that was fascinating to learn. So, and that was a really good cultural experience for her. But in terms of your position, we just make sure that, you know, the deaf employee will get interpreting services at their work. But for anything recreation or outside of work, that's a different story.
You know how like we have accents within ASL, depending on where you are within the country. Black ASL, just different signs, different accents, if you will. And so you will pick that up just the same.
Another question just wants to clarify the FSOA the FSA position, is that only overseas, or can you also work domestically in DC?
Well, it is foreign service. So I think the concept is, yes, that it would be going overseas, but there are a lot of positions that are located within DC where people could even do like a 50-50. They could split if they wanted to go to another country part-time and come back over. I mean, just to not forget how the business operations go here while still understanding the different approaches within other countries overseas. It's good to just remember what we do in DC and to touch base every once in a while.
So I'll just jump in here. Yeah, it is the Foreign Service. If you want to work only in Washington, you may want to look at civil service positions. Those are based domestically. However, Foreign Service, we say it's generally 3 tours out, 1 tour in, which means 3 tours overseas, 1 tour here in Washington. But that is not carved in stone. I personally know people who have never come back to Washington in, you know, a 15-year career. I also know people that for family reasons, often they come back and they spend more time in Washington. I personally have done about half my tours overseas and approximately half my tours here in Washington because my mother's getting older and I wanted to spend some more time with her. There is a limit to the amount of time you can spend in Washington, though, before you either have to, you know, justify why you're staying to human resources or go back overseas again.
Great. We have another 4 questions. One person's asking again about foreign sign language. What about it? What if you don't know that country's language? And I think the question, well, if someone wants to start, it's a little similar to one that we've already answered. Another person's asking if you have a family, do your family move with you when you go to post in another country, or what does it look like for a person with a family?
Absolutely. Spouse, children, everyone is, the department will pay for the relocation to the other country. That's not a problem at all. I believe there is another benefit from the department that they will pay for education. That's from first grade up until high school, until they complete high school. That is funded. So wherever you and your family go, that is there. There are some limitations within a country, perhaps in Iraq or Afghanistan. It will be harder in another country like that. The risk is higher, and so where there is a family risk, they might stay stateside. And so there are additional considerations for where the country is. But I predict that somebody might ask about employment as well. But yes, they will help the post or the embassy. If there is a vacancy for a position, they're happy to have a spouse work there as well. And right now, what a lot of people do, they will work in the private sector, and since they're doing remote, it's fine. So if there's a private company or a private business, they're able to do that. In another country, if they want to still maintain that working relationship where they are, not a problem at all. So it just depends on what the vacancies are and what opportunities they have. So that's, again, EFM, extended family member.
Just to quickly add on to what Doug said.
Tanya, just 1 second.
Sure.
Just a second.
Sorry,
good? Tanya, go ahead. I didn't realize you were speaking.
No problem.
Got switched.
Technology, you've done an amazing job with the technology. I'm so impressed. Just to add on to what Doug said, most countries you can take your family to. There are some restrictions. For example, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, the reason for those is obvious. You cannot take children to those countries. However, if your spouse has a job at the embassy or consulate, your spouse can go with you. I just want to add here, the Foreign Service is not like the military. Where you go is a negotiation between you and the department. Your first 2 tours, we call them directed. Those 2 tours, yes, the department does tell you where you're going to go, but prior to that, you submit a list to the department after you've looked at a list of open positions, and you rank order them. And it's possible, I suppose, but I don't know many people who got outside of their top 10. After that, you apply to whatever embassy or consulate you want to work at, usually several of them, and then you interview, and then the embassy or consulate makes the decision. But you do have a degree of control over where you go, because you choose where you're going to apply. So if you don't want to serve in Afghanistan or Iraq, you have young children, you don't have to apply to them.
Okay, the next question, let me just pull it up. For Foreign Service officers working in a particular country, are there any
do they pick a specific country, or is it general?
This is Doug. So I know, to start, we do have at the State Department, the same phrase of "it depends." I know that that's used all the time, but it really does depend. Some places have, my preferred region, my preferred country, or you even have, like, you want to stay within a country and just go to a few posts that are nearby. Some people like very far reaching posts for their next one. So you have some, if you have a definite no, you're allowed to put down, or if you're an expert in Eastern Europe, or you're an expert in Eastern Asia affairs, they might keep you in a specific place. So it just varies on the background. If you're anything within Latin America, if you have a specialty, of course, they do want to take that into consideration. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but as you bid on a position, that does happen for where you will go. And I will be starting that process myself in the fall, looking at where I want to go, what I like, what would my top choices be, and I can create that myself. Is it guaranteed? Of course not, but it is something that I can have down of what I want, and it does come down to the individual, their preferences and what they would like.
Great. One person asked a specific question for Doug, asking, is it hard to make friends or get into the community when you're in a foreign country?
I guess it depends on who you are. You know, if you're more outgoing, for me, it was easy to make friends. In other countries, I had no problem. Anywhere that I would go, I would see somebody signing and an immediate friend. So that was, that was no problem. In other countries, you might ask, somebody would ask for some domestic help, or they would ask you to help with childcare. And so in the Philippines, for example, a deaf nanny would watch my kids. And so it's a way for me to help support the economy and support the community overseas. And so yes, people immediately are like, you're an American, why are you here? And it's just a great and easy way to establish relationships overseas.
Okay, I have a question for Chris. One person asked, can you talk about a person that might need a cited guide at post, at the beginning at least? What would support look like if they did need a cited guide?
Sure. So we do have foreign service employees who do have low vision or are blind. And we do provide reading services. And sometimes if it's necessary, they need a navigation support. We do provide that as well. We have a team of contractors who do a rotation to provide reading services for blind foreign service employees in Washington, D.C. during their post here, or in other countries overseas. We provide services there as well. Again, reading services. Yeah, that's what we call it. Also for their housing, sometimes they need some housing modifications, and so that they can get around the house easier. And we will provide services by collaborating with a program called Post GSO, the General Service Officer, and we'll make sure that they're able to get whatever equipment or devices installed inside their house there during their stay overseas. So yes, we do provide support services, yes.
Great, and we have one last question. They're asking about the system of promotion. Are promotions done by rank? How do you climb the ladder specifically? And who would like to answer that? Do you want me to repeat the question?
Oh, I just don't know the answer.
Oh, so no one, I think, really 100% knows the answer, but I can sort of speak generally to promote the promotion structure in the Foreign Service. So when you come into the Foreign Service, as I mentioned, you are what's considered an entry-level officer. So it depends on your experience, what grade you come in at. So I started the Foreign Service, I was in my mid-30s, and I had work experience beforehand. So I came in at, we call it an 04, and our grades are numbered in the Foreign Service. But if you just came out of undergraduate, you don't have a lot of experience, you would come in at a lower number. However, once you're both tenured and then you get promoted, you're considered mid-level. And at that point, whether you came as an 06, an 05, an 04, you're now an 03. Mid-level is considered 03 and 02, and then 01 is kind of getting into the more senior management level, and then you have senior foreign service. To get to senior foreign service, it takes about 20 years. So when you are promoted, for example, you go from entry level to an 03. You can be an 03 for up to, now these are generalities. So each step you can stay in grade for approximately 10 years. And then you're expected within that 10 years to get promoted. It is somewhat like the military in that it's an up or out system. If you don't get promoted within those 10 years, you can what we call tick out, which means you're not fired. It's nothing negative. You just separate from the Foreign Service.
We do within civil service. I'm sorry, Tanya. Within civil service, something different that we do have a peer review, and every year there's a promotion panel, and they decide who's promoted. And so it's called a low, I'm sorry I missed that, but overseas they have that, and compared with, they look at all of the other employees, what they have, and if they recommend to the boards that, look, this person might not be a good fit for DOS, or you know, they're not sure what's going on. So Angela, what is it called, Angela?
They just asked generally what the promotion system looked like for Department of State. So the civil service and foreign service do have two different positions with rare, clear, or foreign service. I don't know if you can expand on that at all. If you want to add more, we can add more information to that. But if there isn't anything else, I think we can wrap up unless anyone has any last comments.
Yes, I have one last thing. Please apply. Please apply to the Foreign Service. That is something, again, I will reiterate, I would love to just see more applicants who are deaf and employees here, and just take the expertise and the skills that we have using sign language. And, you know, the people who are deaf represent Americans too. And this is a life and a background that you have. So please apply. Let's make it happen.
Can I start, Sunny? Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. So with the Department of State, you know, it's a very unique agency to work for. And it's because, you know, we have to maintain diplomatic relations with other countries. So not a lot of US agencies, you know, within the US have that experience, but we get that experience and we represent America to other countries. And we want people to truly represent us to other countries. So it's a really great opportunity if you're interested in working overseas. And it's very rewarding. It's a great career. You know, I could work in foreign service, but I have family here, so it doesn't work out for me. But I really encourage you all to please apply.
You could be the first deaf foreign service officer. We really look forward to seeing you at the Department of State and to being able to serve in other countries as well. Please feel free to email us if you have any concerns or if you want to ask any questions, please do feel free to do that. All right.
Bye.
Thank you everyone for being here.